Well, I first met the Sisters of the Community of St. Mary at DeKoven Center in about 1984. I had gone down for a retreat, and they ran the hospitality part of DeKoven at Taylor Hall, and I got to know the sisters a little bit then, and I was at a place in my own spiritual journey where I was seeking direction and looking, and I was really taken by them, especially Sister Dorcas, and was thinking about, well, maybe am I called to be a nun as well? And so I began exploring that question with them and began coming down to the DeKoven Center to stay with Sister Letitia and Sister Dorcas and Sister Jean at that time once a month, and I would spend a weekend and do the routines that the sisters did with their daily offices, and I found it very appealing, and we continued doing that for a while. Sister Dorcas was very engaging. She was, her mother had been a ballerina until she was born. Her mother had her at 40. And so dance was always a real part of her life, and she incorporated that into her spirituality, and just seeing her move, she had an incredible grace, and they managed to, well, she taught folk dancing during their time at DeKoven, and had an incredible bright smile, and she was extremely engaging to the people who came. She was a great greeter and made everyone feel so welcome and comfortable there. And that was a huge drawing factor for many people, and I think why many people came back because of that welcoming. I think I met them at a time when I was in a transition time. Shortly before there, I had moved to Milwaukee. I didn't have a job lined up. I had moved back with my parents when my dad had taken a job here. And so there, you know, there's a little unsettledness there. I had dated someone that I had recently broken up with, and I was searching to find something. My spiritual life had always been really important to me, but I wondered if there was something I was missing, or if there was something more. And I'm a naturally quiet person, so having that quiet routine within a community of people was very appealing, because you weren't isolated, but you also had a great deal of alone time. And as an artist, you need alone time, and I at least thrive on it. But I think the appeal of community living is that you had that framework within which you could move yourself as an individual, but you were always part of a family. And eventually, Sister Letitia, as the president of the order, had met with me after I had been going down for quite some time every month, and just had discerned that this probably was not my vocation to be a nun. And initially I was crushed, but she was right. And so what followed after that was a period where I didn't go down for a bit to, you know, kind of, it wasn't really a breakup per se, but, you know, just to make an ending to that particular chapter in my life. But it was clear that we had become friends, and coming down to be with them was still a viable part of my life, just with the understanding that I was coming down as a person who loved the sisters, loved being with them, and could help out a little bit because I was younger and they were a generation older than I, and there were certain things that I could do for them, which made me feel good too, because, you know, I'm getting free room and board there for a weekend, and you know, you want to be able to repay that. And Sister Letitia played the flute and Dorcas played the violin. I would bring my guitar down and we would make music that way. And I really loved Dorcas teaching the folk dances on Friday night at the gym, which was adjacent to Taylor Hall. And it was just it was a beautiful time. You know, I went on from there to go back and get a little more schooling. I eventually met and married my husband, and that was wonderful. Still is. And, you know, went on to become a deacon, and, you know, all that was down the road. And, you know, all that stuff would not have happened had I stayed within the community. And the other thing I think they were considering is that without more younger people coming into the community, that would mean that that generation of sisters, when they died out, what was I? Had there been 3 or 4 other young people coming in, perhaps it would have looked different, but that really wasn't the case, and that wasn't the way being a sister or a brother in the Episcopal Church community was going. You know, the orders were getting smaller and dying out with that generation. So I think that played into it too. But mostly it was the discernment that God had a different plan for me. Whatever that was, it wasn't to be a sister with the community of St. Mary. They had run the DeKoven Center, and then the diocese took it over. And when that happened, then the sisters who had been responsible for the hospitality and running the place got another home in McWanago that they turned into a retreat center so they could continue their hospitality ministry, because that's what those sisters were called to. And so they invited me to come out to the hospitality place, which they called Mary's Margin. And it was appropriately named because it was a much more avant-garde type of spirituality that they could practice out there that was not within the strictures that I think maybe they felt at DeKoven. And the history of having associates in the community of St. Mary, I think, goes back almost to their beginnings. And associates were people who lived what was called a rule of life, which is something that is Benedictine, and who pledged to help out the sisters in any way possible to further the sisters' ministry. They devised a program called the Inner Peace Corps, which was an opportunity for an individual to come and spend usually a year, but it could be the contract extended longer, geared toward people who are in transition. Say someone had just graduated from college, was trying to think whether to go to grad school, and it provided a place where there was peace and quiet set aside for reflection. Now, the person didn't necessarily have to be a Christian, but it was a person who was willing to work for 20 hours a week for free room and board for the sisters, doing whatever was necessary, and then spend the rest of the time doing their own inner work. And they could participate in as much of the services as they wished. And most people who became Inner Peace Corps people did indeed find a great deal of enrichment out of doing that. And the first person to come through was someone probably half a generation younger than I, and we really clicked. And she was one of the deepest spiritual thinkers I think I've ever met at that age. She had just graduated from St. Olaf College, and had seen, I'm not quite sure where, this advertisement for the Inner Peace Corps, and she was the very first one. And she came and spent a little over a year with the sisters. She was a magnificent cook, so she bonded with Sister Letitia that way, who loved to cook. And she went on then to Berkeley and to the School of Theology there, and got her doctorate, and is a professor in religious studies. And but she had decided to become an associate, and that caused me to look at it a little more closely. I just never bothered, and I was a little concerned about this rule of life thing, what that really meant, because I didn't want to promise to do anything that I didn't think I was really going to do. If I had to commit to doing all the daily offices on my own at home while working and all of the above, I knew I wasn't going to be able to do that. So, but in talking with Sharon, this inner Peace Corps woman, and with the sisters a little further, I realized that that's not exactly, there weren't those kind of strictures. It was a way you were to write your own rule, which was you figuring out how to pattern your own life. For me, as a Christian, what I was going to do, so that was one part of it, you know, making a conscious effort to live in one particular way, to frame your life to follow Christ, but also then how to offer what you had to the sisters and the community for their benefit. And so once again, the short story there is I decided that becoming an associate was not the big threatening scary thing it was, and so I did become an associate in about 1999. And then eventually, when it became clear that Sister Dorcas needed to, even though she was the youngest sister in the community, she had dementia issues and needed more care than Letitia could provide, the decision was made then for all three of them to move to St. John's on the Lake. And then shortly thereafter, they were able to sell the property with Mary's Margin, and Dorcas and Letitia moved into a larger apartment at St. John's, so they each had their own rooms in, you know, a 2-bedroom apartment, where they continued to do, you know, their routine with the daily offices and all of that. But Dorcas eventually then, when she needed to move into the care center, you know, was able to make that transition. When they moved from Mary's Margin to here, it actually meant my involvement with the sisters could increase, because I lived in Milwaukee, and that's where St. John's is, and so I began coming over every week and having dinner with them. And this was, I think it was really good for both of us. I mean, for Dorcas and Letitia, as well as for me, to continue that relationship. And as they got older and less able, I was still able to do things for them. And these dinners turned into a real social event and did bring the community together, because Sister Mary Grace then, who was in assisted living, would join us as well, and we would have a community dinner once a week. And eventually then, Father Fred Himmerick, who lived in one of the apartments here as well, was a friend of the sisters, and he would join us. So the four of us for many, many years had dinner every Thursday night at St. John's. And then I could also work with Letitia to downsize, to try to deal with paperwork, you know, just all of the things that you would do, I think, for an elderly parent as they were entering their final years. And that was an incredible gift to me, because early on, when I first went to visit them, when I was considering a vocation, you know, the tables were turned, that they were very much the caregivers and I was the recipient. And this allowed me, you know, nearly 30 years later, to take care of them. And that is definitely part of what an associate does, is care for the sisters until the sisters are no more. Sister Dorcas died a number of years ago of her Alzheimer's, and she also had leukemia, but visiting her every week was a real trip, because that spirit that enabled her to go to the margins and the fringes of things, and her wild side didn't diminish with her dementia. In fact, it became stronger in some ways until the end. I remember one time taking communion to Sister Dorcas, and I held up the wafer and said, "This is the body of Christ." And she just stopped and she said, "Wow." And there was that wonderful moment before the cloudiness of the dementia came back, but it was a real beautiful thing. And eventually Dorcas died, and so that left a huge hole in Letitia's life, because they were a community, and when the community is that small, it's really hard. And so I became closer to Letitia, and also then Letitia eventually died, and that left Mary Grace, and she's the last remaining sister of the community of St. Mary at 101. And so Father Fred was still alive, and so Fred and I had dinner until COVID hit. And unfortunately, Father Fred died during that time, and I wasn't able to see Mary Grace. But now that we're opening up a bit again, I am able to go and be community for Mary Grace and talk to her. She's 101 now, and doesn't have too many years left on this earth, I would imagine. But as an associate of the community, as long as there is a community, I will serve it, and I will serve Mary Grace and be a friend to her until she dies. And really, with that, my associate dies as well, because there isn't a community anymore here to serve. And I think that the promises we make as associates, which we make forever, you're released from those promises just as you would be released from marriage if your spouse died. It's a commitment that is until death, whoever dies first. And so I'm happy to continue to be with her as long as I can and as long as she's alive.
Hey, Mary Grace, how you doing? Nancy's here. Hey. Oh, hi.
And Sister Mary Grace had an incredible life within the community. She wasn't always in the western province of the community. She traveled among the three provinces, the eastern and the southern, and she was considered Mother General at one time, which meant she was the head of the entire community of St. Mary in the United States.
Now, do you remember ages ago when you still were wearing a habit?
And really played prominent roles in various dioceses, including Milwaukee. And when she retired as Mother General, Letitia became the mother. Well, then I guess there were no more Mother Generals, but each community had what used to be called a Mother Superior, but now they called the President of the Order, which they felt was much more egalitarian. And so when Mary Grace retired from being the President of the Order, then Sister Letitia became the President of the Order. Now there is no President, but there is only Mary Grace left. Mary Grace is this little tiny powerhouse. She was really an extrovert, unlike some of the other sisters, and loved engaging with people and had a fine mind. She taught for a while, but very organized, and she was very committed to the Episcopal Church and the workings of it. And so got herself in pulpits and serving on committees in the national church that most women of her age would not have been able to do. And Mary Grace had the kind of personality, and still does, where she would just consider it absolutely normal that she should be in charge. And she did it well, but that was her gift and her place, to make things happen and to be in the center of it.
Well, yes, I always be in charge of it.
Yep. And I always thought of you, well, she may be small, but she's mighty.
Oh.
And you told me that you even had been invited, was it at the National Church that you preached? You delivered a sermon somewhere.
I don't know. I was forever talking
Yes, I think so.
to somebody for some reason or other.
Yeah. You were, and you got things done.
Well, that was an easy thing for me to do.
Yeah.
I was able to, if somebody was there that needed something, I can manage it.
Yep.
I can manage. I can get in charge so that that person's or that group of people were not working as well as they were.
So you organized people.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. I'm so long that my mind is so full of all the things I have done. That,
You want to empty some out and tell us?
it would be very interesting.
Oh, I think it would be.
You think so?
Yeah.
Well, too bad.
Yeah.
To me,
So how did you get an audience with the Pope?
well, I was one of the most important women here. And so natural. Don't ask me, well, God.
Well, you must have been very important, either representing the Episcopal Church or the community of St. Mary or something.
Yeah, it probably was.
I don't think you were asking the Pope for a date, so it had to be something.
Well, I might have. Yeah. Well, you see, I don't organize the things that I would do according to whether it's going to make any important impression on something. I did that. That never impressed me at all.
No, you were there to convey information probably and to mobilize people to do something.
Yeah, that's right.
If you joined the community even conservatively in your 30s, you've been a sister for about 70 years.
I guess so.
Yeah, it's a long time.
That's right.
101 is not an age many people get to attain.
Well, the thing is, you see, once they got a hold of me, they didn't let me go because he made a good point for if they needed somebody to do something, and they had no idea what they were going to do, and so they just call on me because I can fill up a gap anywhere if I need to.
I think that's very well put. Very well put. Do you still pray?
I pray. I pray every day.
Yeah.
All times.
Yeah. Well, I know that God has you even when you don't remember.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
And he doesn't expect you to remember everything that happened.
No.
You know, that would be top over heady.
Yeah, there'd be too much information going around there.
When you're a lady in your ladies, there's not much that you can do.
Well, I think that even as a lady in your 80s and in your 90s, you really meant a lot to people because you listened to them and you enjoyed talking to them.
Well, then and it's because I have any particular corner in which I was supposed to be denying myself my likes, but I was always a public eye.
That's right. You were in the public eye as a representative of the community and of the Episcopal Church.
Yeah, I remember lots of times in which I had to go someplace as a representative of the church. And had to remember that my best English I have to show off how.
Did you like that?
Yeah, I I rather enjoyed being a big shot.
Yeah. And you were the big shot.
Yeah. You get used to it after a while, but even so, it was the idea that you've been a big mush in the Episcopal Church. I said, oh, I can't do that.
I remember you telling me at one point that you had to sort of give an impromptu sermon.
Oh, I always have, yeah. There are often many times when I have come up to what a man was appointed to do, and it didn't have any sense for what he was doing or what other people were doing. And I had to sort of
Step in?
Yeah, my pitching. I pitched in a lot of stuff.
I bet you were good at it too.
Well, I'm better at spontaneous things than I am of all planned discussion of something.